Hello, Mac Irish Football Fan TV. I'm delighted to be joined by former Northern Ireland international Gerry Armstrong, also known as the voice of La Liga. Gerry, how are you keeping?
Keeping well, thanks. Trying to look after each other in this lockdown situation.
Where are you located right now in the world?
Had been in Spain for over 5 years, but we came back about 18, 20 months ago, back to Northern Ireland, back to Belfast. So I'm back in Belfast now, located.
Okay, and just what are you doing at the moment? Obviously, we're in isolation, but like you're not doing the La Liga anymore. So for anyone who's kind of wondering what you're doing, what are you doing these days?
I haven't done La Liga for 2 years. Obviously, Sky lost the contract, and I've done a lot of work in the last year and a half for Virgin Media down in Dublin. I go down and cover Europa League and Champions League, and obviously the Nations League as well with the Northern Ireland games, the Republic games, Spain, whatever they ask me. But it's been keeping me busy over the last year and a half down south, down in Dublin.
Brilliant. Well, listen, we got you on to talk about your career because you said to me there even before the show started. A lot of people don't actually realize that you were actually a player. So let's talk about your career, kind of how you got into playing football. Because I was watching an interview on Off the Ball, and you didn't get into football till very, very late in your career.
Yeah, I played Gaelic football and soccer all my life as a boy. My grandfather was the founder of St John's GAA club in Belfast, and I played for St John's as a boy, Gaelic football and hurling, until I was 15, 16. And I started playing a little bit of soccer in the streets, but not for any big team as such. I played a little bit in the Down and Connor League for St Paul Swifts and did pretty well. And then I got a suspension. I got banned from Gaelic. I got sent off, and I was suspended for 4 weeks. I was fighting, and shortly after that, I had to play sport. I had to do something on a weekend. I used to train all the time. And so I went down to try and play for Crummick Albion. The manager didn't know me. I was with a friend of mine, and we couldn't get a game there. And then on the way home, another team, Old Park Celtic, had said, "We're looking for players to play for us. Would you be interested?" So we ended up playing for them. And I played well, scored a lot of goals. And then the manager from Crummick came to see me that night and asked me to play for them. And I played maybe 3 or 4 games for Crummick Albion. And Bangor Football Club manager Bertie Neal and Billy Neal came to watch me play at a game and asked me to train at Bangor. So I went to play for Bangor. But I wasn't really up to standard in terms of knowing the rules of soccer as such, offside. And obviously Gaelic was a lot more physical then, and hurling. And I'd been playing Gaelic and hurling, and I played a lot for Antrim. I played senior football for Antrim and St John's when I was 15 for St John's, and for Antrim when I was 17 I was playing minor, under 21 and senior football for Antrim. Won Ulster titles with Antrim under 21. Played against Mickey Hart when he was playing for Tyrone. And then in the semi-final of the All-Ireland, we went down to Kerry. That was a few months before I actually signed for Spurs. I played down in Tralee against Paddy O'Shea, Pat Spillane, that famous Kerry team. And they beat us in the semi-final down in Tralee, and had a lot of fun. What a character Paddy was, had some great fun. And then obviously met up with Paddy in the years after that before he died. God rest his soul. And so my career was developing, but I had basically a Gaelic and a hurling background. And my first game for Bangor reserves as a sub, I come on with 15 minutes, and 7 minutes later I get sent off for punching the centre half. So it was one of those you had to learn as it was going along. But then I learned a lot at Bangor Football Club, and 3 years later, Tottenham, Arsenal, a lot of the other clubs were after me, and I eventually ended up signing for Spurs in 1975. Terry Neal was the manager, and he signed me, and I went and played for Tottenham then for 5 years, and en route to that, I made my international debut for Northern Ireland, which was against West Germany then in 1977. They were world champions, and it was a dream come true for me, playing for my country, but playing up front with George Best, which was incredible. Danny Blansfar was my manager, and I remember the day before when he told me I was going to be playing, and I was going to be playing up front with George Best. So I couldn't have been any better than that, to be honest, Paul. So that was the start of my career with Tottenham, and obviously Northern Ireland. And after 5 years, I was quite a versatile player, and I played a lot of games for Tottenham as a fullback and as a centre half. Keith Bergenshire fancied me as a centre half, and I played there to help the team out when there was injuries. Remember one game we played West Bromwich Albion away, and he was struggling for centre half, and he threw me in, and I was marking Cyril Regis, who was a handful, but I was strong and quick and handled him, and we won the match 1-0. And Keith decided that's where he wanted me to play, and it was frustrating because 1977-78, Tottenham, who were relegated for the only time in their career, we were away to Stoke, and John Duncan was injured. He was the main centre forward, and I played up front for Tottenham, and we beat Stoke 3-1, and I scored a couple of goals. And the following day, the Sunday, I flew out to Belfast to play for Northern Ireland against Belgium in a World Cup qualifier, and I played the full game. That was my first full international match at Windsor Park, and we beat them 3-0, and I scored twice in that. And I came back. I remember coming back on the Thursday morning, and then went into training on the Friday, and I thought, this is going to be interesting because John Duncan was fit, and the manager had a decision to make, and he was saying, fantastic, you've had 2 goals at the weekend for us, and then 2 for Northern Ireland in the World Cup qualifier against Belgium. And I remember looking at the team sheet, and in those days there was only the 11 players and 1 sub, and I looked to see
is it the 13th man as well, isn't there?
Sorry?
They had like a 12 players, but they had a 13th man who travelled with the squad, wasn't it? I think Terry Phelan was saying that.
They had a 13th man, but he wasn't on the team sheet. It was just in case somebody took sick before the kickoff or before you announced the team and put the lineup as such. They always had a 13th man, but I thought, well, if I'm not playing, I'm going to be sub, and it was easy to make me a sub because it was so versatile, which is a problem. And I wasn't even on the subs bench. I was playing centre half at Bristol City for the reserves, and Peter Shreves was the manager then of the reserve team, Tottenham, and I couldn't believe it, and I wasn't happy. So I went to see the manager, Keith Bergenshire, and said I didn't want to play at centre half. I wanted to play up front. That's where I like playing. And he said, no, I see you as a centre half. He said, we don't have enough centre halves, and you're the best centre half we've got. So I said, no, I'm not happy. So I put in a transfer request, which he turned down. And then Peter Shreves obviously had to play me at centre half in the reserves at Bristol. And I said to Peter, if we're losing, you've got to stick me up front. So we went 1-0 down with about 20 minutes to go, and he let me go up front for 5 or 10 minutes. And I equalised to make it 1-1 with a header. And then he said, right, get back to centre half again. So it was that sort of a situation at Tottenham, and I was looking for a way out. And I didn't know Graham Taylor at Watford had been following me for over a year and trying to get me to sign, but Tottenham were reluctant to sell me because of my versatility. And in the end, they let me go in 1980, and I joined Watford, and Elton John and the boys, and had a lot of fun there. Great club, very much a family club. The camaraderie was excellent. I joined it the same week as Pat Rice had joined from Arsenal, who loads of experience, knew football inside out, coaching, and was a fantastic signing for Watford as well for his experience. And he came in and played for many years after that at Watford. And Les Taylor was the midfield player they signed. So the 3 of us all signed at the same time. And Watford were, I think, bottom 3 or 4 of the second division then. And we finished mid-table that season. And then it was planning for the following year, which was 1981-82 season. And that was the season, obviously, it was a big year for me because Watford went up, which was the first thing, and we planned to go up, and that was the setup from the very start. Graham Taylor, first game, we were going to Newcastle away, and he said, right, our plan is to win and to get promotion this year into top flight football. And he had taken them from the 4th to the 3rd and the 3rd to the 2nd, and now this is the final stage of going to the top flight to top division, Division 1. And we did actually go up that year, but it was also the year that I was playing for Northern Ireland, and we were playing against Portugal and Sweden, Israel and Scotland to qualify. 2 teams qualified for the World Cup, and it was a battle because Portuguese were a good side, and they had beaten us 1-0 in Portugal, and we beat them 1-0 in Belfast, and I scored the winning goal in that match. And then we had Scotland at home. We had drawn with Scotland away, and we should have beaten Scotland at Windsor Park. But unfortunately, it finished a 0-0 draw, and we thought we'd missed the boat. But Sweden were playing that night. Our game was an afternoon kickoff, and that night Sweden were playing, and Portugal were at home, and I thought Portugal will beat Sweden. But I remember Martin O'Neill went into his room in the hotel, in the Culloden Hotel in Belfast, and we were all up and a little bit despondent because we thought we needed to win the match. And Martin came up and said, "Here, I've got some news for you guys." He said, "Sweden's 1-0 up against Portugal." And I thought, hey, maybe we'll have a chance here. And then he came back another 15 minutes later to tell us that Portugal had equalised. And in the second half, it continued, and he came in to say Portugal had went 2-1 down. And then when he came in the next time with 5 minutes to go, I thought he was going to say it's 2-2, but it wasn't. Portugal were 3-1 down, and Sweden beat them. So that meant that we only needed to beat Israel last game at Windsor Park to qualify for the World Cup in '82, which was a fantastic situation to be in, knowing you have one game left at home. And Windsor Park was packed, and I scored, and we beat them 1-0. And that was us qualified for the World Cup. So it was a fantastic year for me, 81-82 season. Qualified Watford for the top division in football, and also Northern Ireland going to the World Cup. And every player's dream, obviously, to play in the World Cup final. So as they say, the rest is all history. We went over, total underdogs. Nobody gave us a chance. I remember St. Greavesy on television. They were the big guys on TV at the time. And basically, they said, "Look, great to see Northern Ireland there. They've done well to get there." Big friend of mine, Pat Jennings, obviously, we played together at Tottenham. And he said, "I wish Pat well, but I don't see them being there too long. Can't see them scoring a goal. Can't see them picking a point up." So we were very determined that we were going to do it properly. And we had a good defensive unit. We were very solid, and we worked really hard for each other. And basically, we went out there. We drew the first game, which was a 0-0 draw away to Yugoslavia in Zaragoza in the north of Spain. And we were based in Valencia in the south in a hotel called the City Soler Hotel, which was a great setting. And we'd done our training at the University of Sussex in Brighton for about 10, 12 days before we went to Spain. And it was hot, and it was good preparation. Billy Bingham had us fit. We trained really hard and worked hard. And this young lad in training who I'd never seen play, I seen him play maybe 2 months earlier in the Youth Cup final between Watford and Manchester United. It was the Youth Cup final, and it was the second leg. Watford won 3-2 at Old Trafford, and the second leg finished 4-4 at Vicarage Road. And I watched the two front lads for Manchester United. One was called Norman Whiteside, and the other one was Mark Hughes. And two fabulous players. Great game. We had John Barnes, Nigel Callahan, Kenny Jackett, Steve Terry, all playing in the youth team then at Watford. And Watford obviously won the Youth Cup, which was a fantastic achievement. But it was the first time I got to see Norman Whiteside, and little did I know he was going to be in the World Cup squad. And he impressed so much in training that Billy Bingham said, "Look, I'm going to stick this kid up front." And he's naturally left-footed, and we don't have any naturally left-footed players. Mal Donaghy was playing left back, and Mal wasn't naturally left-footed. And Sammy McIlroy, David McCurry, Martin O'Neill were the midfield trio. And Billy then decided he was going to put me back deeper in a right side of midfield role to support the midfield because I had so much power and energy. And he said, "You'll help it in midfield, and Norman and Billy will be up front." And it worked out really well for me because I found I wasn't picked up as much in the World Cup. I was able to get more space. I was able to use my pace and power a lot, and it became a massive World Cup for Northern Ireland and obviously myself. And we played Honduras the second game. The plan was to beat them, and we went 1-0 up. I managed to score in that match, and should have scored again. I hit the post, and then they equalised later on. A guy called Betancourt, who was the centre forward, and he scored a great header and finished 1-1. And then as a result of that, we had to beat Spain in the final game in Valencia in their own backyard, and nobody gave us any chance of getting anything out of that game. But Martin O'Neill had a plan. He told us the day before by the pool, and he actually said, "Listen, they're going to come at us for the first 15, 20 minutes. We'll get behind the ball. We'll do what we're good at. We'll play them across the park and not let them penetrate. frustrate them. He said, and then we'll create chances ourselves. We'll get 2 or 3 chances, and we'll stick one away. We'll beat them 1-0. That was the day before the game, and it's sort of, the result was right. It didn't quite go the way we'd planned. We didn't know Mal Donaghy was going to get sent off after 50 minutes in the game, and but I managed to score the goal. Big Billy Hamilton did fantastic with a fantastic cross from the right hand side. He went past Tendillo down the right and then put a great cross in. Arcanata made a mistake, and I pounced on the mistake and stuck it in the back of the net. So eventually we won the game 1-0, and went back to our hotel to celebrate, and that was us through to the quarterfinals to play Austria and then France. And the Austria game, it was a 2-2 draw. Big Billy scored 2 great goals, and we should have won that match as well. But then France was the quarterfinal, and if we beat France, we go through to the semi-finals to play West Germany, or Germany. And Martin O'Neill scored a great goal after 15-20 minutes, and the linesman raised the flag, and he was never offside. When you look at the replay, you can see he's well onside. I always maintain if we'd have scored that goal, we could well have been in the semi-final playing Germany. And people said, well, if you'd have played Germany, sure, you would have lost anyway. But then it was about 6 months after the World Cup, we played Germany in qualification for the Euros, and we beat them 1-0 at Belfast. Ian Stewart scored the winning goal. And then 6 months later, we played them in Hamburg, which was my 50th cap. And we beat them 1-0 again. Norman Whiteside scored. So we beat Germany home and away in both games. And I don't think any other nation has done that in a competition against Germany. So that's a bit of history there. But it also, you know, my career at Watford was great. I went into top flight football with Watford in the summer. Our first game was against Everton at Vicarage Road, and I scored the first goal for Watford in top flight football. We beat Everton 2-0. Pat Rice got the other goal, and we went top of the table after 4 or 5 games, and everybody said Watford's going to get relegated. They're not good enough. They're a kick and rush team. But they didn't know we had some great lads. John Barnes was just coming through as a star. Nigel Callahan, another one, great crosser of the ball, fantastic goal scorers. Luther Blissett, Ross Jenkins. You know, we had a really good outfit. The manager was brilliant, had us so well organised. Graham Taylor was a fantastic manager, probably the best club manager I played under. And we had belief. And unfortunately, I went to jump for a ball in a training match and landed awkwardly on the outside of my foot, and went over on it and broke my fib and tib. I broke my fibula and my tibia. So I was out for 3 months and managed to get back towards the end of the season, and we ended up beating Liverpool last game of the season, and they won the league that day, but we came second. We beat Manchester United into 3rd place. We finished second, runners up, and I was on the move shortly after because I got an offer from Mallorca. And I took the offer and went to try my hand in Spanish football. And that's how I ended up going to Spain in 1983. So 1983 was a very interesting year. It was a big gamble for me at the age of 29 to join a club who had just been promoted, but had a lot of good players who had been brought in from Madrid, from Racing Santander, from Barcelona. Paco Martinez came in from Barcelona. Andreas Sabido had arrived, the centre half from Real Madrid. So they invested in players, but we weren't a team. We weren't really a team, and we played as individuals the first half a dozen games of the season, and then we gradually started to formulate a decent side. And I had 2 good years, obviously, in Spain at Real Mallorca, and shortly after that, I decided I would go back and play the rest of my career out in England. And I was training at Queen's Park Rangers with Ray Houghton, and I were both training together, and we were looking to sign. I think Ray was he was coming from one club. I was a free transfer, obviously, coming from, because my contract was up in Spain, so I was a free agent. And Johnny Giles contacted me from West Bromwich Albion, and he invited me to play for West Brom, and I travelled up with Gareth Crooks on a daily basis, signed for West Brom, and did about 6 or 7 months at West Brom because Johnny packed it in. And shortly after that, I then went on loan to Chesterfield to get some games because Ron Saunders took over. But when Ron took over, he wouldn't pick any player who lived outside a 25-mile radius of West Brom. So that meant that Jimmy Nicholl, Mickey Thomas, Imre Verardi, myself, and Gareth Crooks, the five of us, we couldn't play. And I needed to play football because we had just qualified for the World Cup in '86. And I needed to get some games. So I signed for John Duncan the last 8 games of the season and played for Chesterfield. And John was a teammate of mine, obviously, at Tottenham. And I was allowed to train at Tottenham and then just go up and play at the weekends for Chesterfield, and managed to keep them up. And had some good games there. Played the World Cup in 1986 in Mexico. And we were in a tough group, which had Brazil, Spain, and Algeria in our group. And we picked up a point against Algeria. We got beaten 2-1 by Spain. And then my final game, which was Pat Jennings' final game and Billy Hamilton's final game, 1986 Brazil, in the Jalisco Stadium in Guadalajara. And we lost 3-0. That's Caracas scored 2, and a guy called Josimar, that goal, I don't know if you remember it, Paul, when it did everything but... A bit
before my time.
Yeah, it was crazy goal. He was a fullback and he hit the ball, and because of the altitude, the ball looked like it was going 3 or 4 yards wide and 3 or 4 yards over the crossbar, and it deviated. It moved all over the place and straight in the top left-hand corner. If you had 2 goalkeepers, then you wouldn't have saved it. But that was Pat Jennings' final game, 119 caps, and it was his birthday, the 12th of June. So he was, I can't remember, was he 41 or 42? But I think he was 41. I think that day was 41. And we then retired from the international scene. But when I came back, I signed for Brighton. Alan Mullery was the manager of Brighton, and he convinced me to sign for them. And that was another part of my career where I went and played for 4 or 5 years as a player and then as a coach. I did a little stint at Millwall where I was on loan for, I think, about 8 or 9 games. I was on loan there and played up front with a young lad who was only about 17, 18 at the time, and his name was Teddy Sheringham. So that was interesting. Teddy, great lad, good friend of mine, and wonderful touch on the ball, great goal scorer. I was the target man, and Teddy played off anything I flicked on and what have you. But had a good run with Millwall, met a lot of good lads there. And then obviously I went to non-league football. But as I was going into the non-league football scene, I was starting to do a little bit of work with the television. And George Best, who was a good friend of mine working at Sky, he had said to me, would you be around next Sunday to play in a 5-a-side game just for 20 minutes, half an hour for a television documentary for Channel 4? And I said, right, what is it? And he said, me and you and a few of the lads, he said, we'll play a small-sided game to show how many touches you can get on the ball and how our small-sided games are better than 11v11 for your skill and technique, which is what they used to do in Spain. They played football sala with a smaller ball, like a size 3 ball, and your touch would improve, and that was the way the Spanish improved their technique. So I said, yeah, no problem. So on the Friday, he phoned me, he said, are you still okay for Sunday? And I said, yeah. I said, who else is playing? He said, well, at the minute, he said, I haven't got anybody else. And he says, I'm just phoning to tell you, I can't make it. He said, so it's just you at the moment. Can you get some more lads? So George, I was laughing with George, and I said, look, I'll phone Kenny Sampson and a few of the lads who lived in London and get them to play. So we played, and George didn't obviously play. But the producer afterwards, he interviewed us about the small-sided games and about hard small-sided games and playing with a smaller ball can improve your touch. And I said, look, in Spain, that's what they do. And he said to me, I was talking to George, he told me you played in Spain and you speak Spanish. And I said, yeah, I do. And he said, I'll start work next week, he said, on a project at Sky. And he said, Sky are taking for a year, they're taking Spanish football and they know nothing about it. Would you be interested in coming on as a guest? And I said, yeah, I'll give it a go. So the following Saturday, I went and did my first game for Spanish football for Sky, and they said it went well. And they said, what are you doing next week? And I said, nothing. So I came back the following week, and then 22 years later, it was still going strong until Sky lost the contract. And basically, we haven't had it on Sky for the last 2 years, which is a big disappointment for me, obviously, Paul. And I know a lot of people in the UK love watching the show, and they could see the young talent and the particularly skillful players who were in Spain. And I know the Premier League has been poaching those players for about 10, 15 years now. But you know, it's been an interesting journey for me. But a lot of players end up getting into television. I looked at Gary Lineker when he was playing at Barcelona. I was at Mallorca. I remember speaking to Gary when he joined, and he went on to become a big presenter, obviously, for football and BBC. So lots of fun and lots of enjoyment. And one of the ones that I'm going to mention is obviously Michael Robinson, who was a big friend of Graham Souness's at the time, and Rob, who I played against. And he got married, and he ended up coming to Mallorca, part of his honeymoon with. And Graham was obviously there at the time, and I was with Graham. We were good friends. He had left Liverpool, and his wife's family lived in Mallorca, and I knew them. And he came over and he chatted, and I was trying to get him a move to Barcelona. And Terry Venables was the manager, and Terry would only give him a 1 year contract, and I think he wanted at least 2, so he ended up going to Italy instead. And we met up and had a night out, and he had just got married. He said, "Oh, I've had an approach from a club called Osasuna," and he said they're asking me about coming to play in Spain. He said, "What's it like?" And I said, "It's great. You know, I'm enjoying it." I said, "Different, the skill and techniques more to the fore." I said, "But they love, you know, a robust sort of centre forward who puts himself about, because they're all about skill and technique." I said, "You do well there." So he ended up joining Osasuna along with Sammy Lee. And of course, I heard the news this morning that Rob had passed away, and didn't even know he had been sick or was ill with skin cancer. But Michael Robinson was huge in Spain, and Canal Plus was the company he had worked for many years, and we did a lot of shows together for the Clásicos. He used to be at Barcelona, and I would be there with Sky at the same time, and it was the same for Madrid, and he was a big Madrid fan. He loved following Madrid. But that was the sad news I heard this morning. So R.I.P. Robbo, Michael, and he played obviously for the Republic of Ireland and was a fantastic guy. But that was sad news to hear as well, Paul, this morning.
Yeah, definitely. Especially, you know, it seemed to affect so many people. I woke up to the news, and I've seen so many people posting about it, and you know, big names as well as yourself, you know, mentioning them. You know, it was all over social media, even Sky Sports. Everybody was posting about it. So he obviously left a huge mark. And you spoke to me on the phone earlier, and just kind of mentioned how big he was over in Spain. Like you said, he had presidents of clubs on his show and stuff like that.
Barcelona, Real Madrid presidents, all friends for him, and he brought them on the show. And he did a show before the weekend, like on a Friday. He would do El Dia Antes, which is the day before, which was the show. And he did an interview, and he'd talk about the games, and he'd talk to top managers, not just presidents, but top managers. And then on the Monday after, he'd have El Dia Después, which is the day after, and he had that show. And that was his own show, his own idea. He was brilliant. He was good in the commentary position. He used to commentate on all the opens, the golf. He'd go to America, he'd cover the US Open, and he did that. He loved his golf as well. And he was a fantastic guy. And we used to have chats before about football, before the games, and we'd have chats afterwards and have, you know, Rob would love the glass of red wine, the Rioja, and we'd go out and have 2 or 3 bottles of wine and talk about football and about careers and life in general. And just, he was a fantastic guy and a good friend of mine. So disappointed to hear that.
Well, I'm very sorry for your loss, and you know, thoughts and prayers go out to his family at this point in time as well. But kind of, I just want to talk to you about, you know, La Liga, and you know, your kind of, I don't think, well, maybe you do realize, but you had such a, how do I put it, like a big presence over the UK and Ireland in regards to Spanish football. Like I grew up, I have some of the best memories with my dad. My dad since passed away, but I've had some of the best memories just watching Spanish football. Your voice, Rob Palmer, on the commentary, and just watching games every Saturday night. I remember being in my dad's room watching the football with him, and you'd have Barcelona, Real Madrid, Valencia, all these. Even Deportivo back then were really good, you know. So and you probably remember them. Sorry?
Super Depor. That's what they called them. Super Depor, the fans.
Well, you obviously remember they played Shelbourne as well. So we were obviously massive Shelbourne fans here too. So all of those kind of things kind of came together. And then as time went on, there was Revista de la Liga, which was obviously a massive show. And you're obviously a massive part of it. I think that your voice is a massive part of a lot of people's childhood. How does that make you feel, considering you didn't get into football till quite late? Then you went over, moved to Spurs. Then you moved to Mallorca, and I'm sure that's kind of where you got that, learning Spanish and stuff. And that's kind of how you got your little bit of an in. And then the thing with George Best, but kind of just you were there 22 years, you said. So kind of talk to me a bit about that and how that was, because you, as I said, you're such an iconic figure in that sense.
It's surreal because I was fortunate enough to play professionally for nearly 20 years, and I had a really good career. But then I was able to walk and step straight into the commentary situation, which was obviously a lot down to George and being at the right place at the right time. And I was obviously disappointed when La Liga finished because it has been a big part of my life, and I was synonymous with La Liga. And I remember the first game that Dave Lawrence was my producer. After the first year, Channel 4, they were brought in by Sky to do the show, the producers, directors, but they were also training a lot of the Sky people on how to do a football program. And I started off initially just as the studio guest, and we had different presenters because a lot of them didn't know Spanish football. It was something totally strange coming into the UK for the first time in 1995, 96. And by the way, the big team then was actually Atletico Madrid. And Simeone was the star man in the Atletico Madrid side. And there were some fantastic players who played for Atletico Madrid. I don't know, I watched a little bit of footage the other night of Christian Vieri playing for Italy in World Cups. And obviously, Vieri was top goal scorer in La Liga, and he was top goal scorer for Atletico Madrid. And when you had Simeone playing as well, and of course, it was crazy, when you're watching the football and watching the talent coming through. But the following year after that, I was told to Sky that there was a new producer was taking it over for the first time of Spanish, and I'd done a year at Sky, but working because of Channel 4 through the producers and directors there, and George Best that got me involved. But they told me that this guy was taking over, Dave Lawrence. He was a new producer, and he said he wanted to meet me for lunch. So I met him, and we're having lunch. So he said, right, so tell me, Gerry, he said, how are we going to do this? He said, we've got a 2-hour program. How are we going to do it? And I went, what do you mean? And he went, so how are we going to set it up? And I said, well, you're the producer. I said, I'll give you all the information. I'll explain to you what it's all about. It's different to Premier League football because Premier League then was a lot more physical. It was all more about athleticism. I said, whereas in Spain, it's more about your touch, the skill, the quality they have in front of goal. I said, it's a different type of football. And I was trying to explain this to him. And he says, and I said to him, so how many games have you done before in football? I said, what have you been doing for Sky? And he says, I've never covered a football match before in my life. He said, I do greyhounds. I do greyhound racing. He said, that's what I've been doing. Football. So he basically asked me how to do it. And I said, well, look, we need to explain to the audience in the UK what Spanish football is all about. And it's about technique and skill. And I said, well, we'll do a profile of one player from each team. And the first profile we did was Deportivo La Coruña, one of the big clubs. And they had a centre forward called Rivaldo, who was technically fantastic, great left foot, scored goals with overhead kicks and skill and technique. He was sensational. He was a big star. And he didn't stay too long, obviously, at Deportivo before he moved to Barcelona. And they were playing Celta Vigo, who were a wonderful club. And they had a couple of Russian stars. One of them was Alexander Mostovoy. And he was the other player I said we should profile because of his skill and technique. They had another Russian called Valery Karpin, who was a right winger, sensational player. But Deportivo were a brilliant club, and they went on to win their first and only title. I think shortly after that, in the year 2000, Deportivo won La Liga for the only time. But they had so many quality players. Donato was a centre midfield player. And Mario Silva, the Brazilian, was a class player. Mario Silva, I loved watching him. He was the anchor man in midfield, and he created and he broke up and started attacks. And there was so many good players in that side. And there's a little left winger called Fran, and I used to call him my man Fran. And he was unbelievable. What a left foot he had. But there were so many good names. And there were so many stars coming through, and we were the voice of European football and of Spain, which was, main attraction at the time. And myself and Rob Palmer, and obviously then Guillaume Balaguer came on board after 2 or 3 years as well. He came into the Revista de la Liga. He did all the reporting from a journalistic point of view, and which was great. We had an ex-footballer who knew about football, and we had a journalist who looked at it from different angles, from the political angles, which a lot of politics in Spanish football, obviously with Barcelona and the Catalan club, and obviously Madrid, the two Madrids, Atletico Madrid. But wonderful players coming through all the time, and it was great to be a part of that and to develop it. And as it developed, obviously we developed, and it started going out all over the world, and suddenly there was people in China and Singapore and Hong Kong wanted to know about Spanish football. And it's that's how the media works, and that's when all the internet started coming to the fore. But it was a big plus for me, and obviously my career at the time. So I spent a lot of years doing that and seeing all the new stars coming through.
But you also became very popular. I mean, as I said, I put out a post the other day that you were coming on, and you're not necessarily associated, obviously, with the Republic of Ireland. And even the fact, just because you're basically the voice of La Liga, that everyone was like, "Oh, that's class! I can't wait to hear about him," and kind of how we got into doing La Liga and stuff like that. But it's kind of funny the way, because you played with so many good players, as you mentioned. You had George Best, Martin O'Neill, Sammy McElroy. And they're just at international level, Pat Jennings at international level. But when you bring it to club level as well, you mentioned John Barnes, Norman Whiteside as well, you mentioned as well. So there's so many top players that you mentioned, but people more associate you with the TV side of things, which is a bit mad. Yeah. But what was it like, playing with the likes of George Best and that? Because the reason I'm asking about him is because you would have seen the likes of Cristiano Ronaldo, Brazilian Ronaldo, Zidane, Figo, Roberto Carlos, Xavi, Iniesta. I think I've mentioned Messi already, but George Best, on their level, you would have seen them. Like, how could you compare? Obviously, they're different players. I get that, but I mean, on that level.
It's an interesting question, actually, because I've had so many people ask me that question, and it's a difficult one, because when I watched George Best and I watched him training first and saw what he could do, and George never really hit his peak. He never fulfilled all his potential. But even before he fulfilled his potential at 18, 19, 20, 21, he was the best player in the world at the time. And he could do things that nobody else could do. And George was just sensational. And when you train with him or you're in his company, he's such a nice guy. He's so down to earth. He just loved playing football, but he could train. He could jump. He could head a ball. He scored goals with his head. He was brave. He could tackle. He scored goals with his left foot. He scored them with his right foot. But it was his dribbling ability, running with the ball, and he was unbelievable. I remember stuff in training sessions where he would nutmeg players, and he would do it so easy. And I remember in the game against Germany, and they had some big stars, obviously, at the time, and he nutmegged some of the stars, and they obviously then resorted to kicking him. And if you kick him, he'll keep doing it. He'll just keep nutmegging you. And then he would play, when they knew he was going to nutmeg them, they'd close their legs tight together, and he would flick the ball with the outside of his foot and play a 1-2 off their shins and go past them. And then he would stop and say, "Come on," and he'd take them on again. He was just a showman, but he was brilliant. And it was great having him as a teammate. And I'd never seen anybody who could do what he could do. And this was at the start of my career, obviously, and I was then fortunate enough playing with Glenn Hoddle at Tottenham. The skill and technique Glenn had was unbelievable. What a player, and all different attributes. But when I moved to Spain, I saw Maradona for the first time. I played. I scored my first goal at home for Real Mallorca against Barcelona, and Maradona was in the team for Barcelona, as was Migueli, as was Schuster, Julio Alberto. I mean, they had an array of talent that was unbelievable, but Maradona stood out. What he could do with his left foot, he was so quick, it was unbelievable. He did things I'd never seen before, and I thought, wow, what a player. But I'm looking at George and his career and the players he played with, and the laws of the game, you're allowed to tackle from behind. I see some of the kickings he got, and he just kept going. You know, Chopper Harris kicked lumps out of him when he was playing against Chelsea and different people. But George would just, he had this balance. He was like a ballerina, and he could go 45 degrees one way and come back the other way, and the defenders going the wrong way. And he was just amazing to watch in training. But he had a fabulous attitude in terms of wanting to play, wanting to train, wanting to beat people, wanting to score goals. You know, you look at his record at Manchester United when he was a teenager at 19, 20, 21. And I always think if George had played now in this present time, he would have been head and shoulders above them all. You know, and I see Messi. George never really saw Messi, and I think George would have loved Messi as a player. You know, because he was only coming through when George died, and Messi would have been his type of player. And Messi reminds me a lot of George in a lot of ways. Although Messi's right foot is probably his weakest foot, but I've seen him score goals with his right foot. I've seen him score goals with his head. And over the last probably 10 years, I think Messi's probably the best player I've seen. But George would certainly be up there. I've had arguments with Glenn Hoddle over it. He thinks Messi's number two. He thinks
number two to who? George.
Number two to Maradona. He thinks
Okay.
Maradona is the top man. He's always said Maradona. But there's different arguments, and it's to do with the time and the era that they played in. I just think with modern football now, George would stand out. And could you imagine what he would be worth? You know, the skill, the technique, the entertainment. You know, it's a good question, and it's a very debatable question, obviously. But that's my opinion on it. And I did play with Maradona. I played, been out with Maradona. Had a couple of beers with him, with the Argentinian lads. You know, I've seen and played against some fantastic players. I played in the quarterfinal of the World Cup against Michel Platini, and who was a sensational player as well. But there's lots of players who come through. Johan Cruyff, another one, when he played for the Dutch team, and he was a massive name, obviously, at Barcelona when he took over there. So there's lots of different players over different eras who have made their mark. But Ronaldo as a goal scorer in the last 10 years, unbelievable. I mean, the goals he has scored and his dedication, professionalism, it stands out that he's still playing at his age in Juventus and still scoring goals. You know, but I loved the old Ronaldo. You remember the Brazilian Ronaldo?
Oh, that's when I'm talking about growing up watching football, listening to you. That was Ronaldo. He was unbelievable.
That was me. Well, you know how much I loved that Ronaldo. He was big Ron. He was class. You know, and you think of the injuries he had, and yet he kept scoring goals left, right, and centre. His pace, his finishing was unbelievable. He was just one of the most favourite players for me. But then it moved on, and then all of a sudden along came the new stars. And I've looked at some of the stars who have come into La Liga. And Zinedine Zidane, I have to say, for 3-4 years, I loved watching Zinedine Zidane play for Real Madrid. And then when Beckham came and he was knocking long passes, and Zidane, he's a big lad. I mean, I don't know if you know, Zinedine Zidane's like 6'1", 6'2", and he had such a great touch on the ball for a big man. You know, he was just different class, and I love watching him. And then, of course, you had the Ronaldinhos who came along, and Ronaldinho was another one who, you know, I was blessed to actually have so much talent that played at the same time in the era.
Cream of the crop, Gerry.
Sorry?
Cream of the crop.
It was the cream of the crop, but I mean, a lot of these players then, you know, I talked about players on the television, and then I'd have David Pleat phoning me from Tottenham and saying, here, what sort of a player is this lad? You were talking about this when I went to watch him. He's such a good player. And, you know, and then I had the likes of Eric Steele, who's teammate of mine from my Watford days, and Eric would be phoning me up and he'd be saying, I'm looking at a goalkeeper. And I said, I've been watching for 3 or 4 games now. And he talked to me and I said, right, okay. And I said, who are you looking at? He says, David De Gea. And he was working for Manchester United, and he watched him maybe 10, 12, 15 times that year before they actually bought him. And, you know, it's great getting an insight from people like that and how they watched him. And I said, well, he's a little bit thin. He's a little bit frail. And he could find it problem, he said, because they're used to getting free kicks. If you're put under pressure in Spain, they get free kicks much more readily than they would do in the Premier League. And I made that comparison. He says, I know. He said, but have you seen, I'll send you a photograph of Van der Sar, who was the goalkeeper at Manchester United then. And he sent me a photograph of Van der Sar when he was 17, 18, and he was really thin and hadn't got a lot of muscle on him. He says, but he developed it. And he says, I'm going to look after him. So Eric Steele, when the hair came to Manchester United, he took him on one-on-ones, developed them, put him under pressure that he was going to get from Premier League players, and filled him out and made him obviously a better goalkeeper, which I think you'll find if you speak to him, he'll tell you that. But these were the insights that we were getting. And, Guillaume Balaguer used to come in and tell me stories and say, well, I've been talking to the president of this club and the director at that club, and they're telling me they're going to sign this one, they're going to sign that one. I said, really? And, that was hard it worked. And I remember one show he came in and said, I've just heard, he said, Ronaldo. And I said, what about him? And he said, he's joining Real Madrid. He said, the deal's done. He said, they've got an agreement. I went, he can't be leaving Manchester United. I said, he's under contract. And what was his buyout clause? And his buyout clause was like 70 odd million. I said, they're not going to pay 70 odd million. He said, yeah, they're going to pay it. He said, they've agreed it. And he said, he signed a deal. It's all done. And I said, really? And then we discussed it. And then the next day, we broke the story on La Liga. We said that Ronaldo was signing that summer. He was leaving Manchester United and he was going to play for Real Madrid, and the deal had been done and all the rest of it. And it was all poo-pooed by the press and said, no. And then suddenly, like 7, 8 days later, it all comes out that he had actually signed. So we broke a lot of big stories and started things. There was one fantastic occasion. I remember Steve McManaman had signed for Real Madrid, and I knew Steve very well, and I remember putting him in contact with Real Madrid when he was leaving Liverpool before he signed, and we kept in touch. We used to speak to him before the games. We'd go to the hotel and have a little interview with him and meet him. And we were doing Classico at the Nou Camp, and we were walking down the tunnel. And as you come down the tunnel, myself, Rob Palmer, and the cameraman are coming down. And on the right-hand side, there's a little chapel at the top of the tunnel. And we went down past the chapel and onto the pitch. And we met Steve McManaman, and we did an interview with him on the pitch, which was something totally new. Nobody had done that before. And we were there on the spot, and we were talking to Steve. And then Fernando Hierro comes past, and we said hello to Fernando Hierro, and he spoke a little bit of English. We interviewed him. And Raul came past. So you would never, ever get that in a Premier League game. You couldn't get that. You couldn't get cameras on the pitch. But the reason we did that was because Lorenzo Serra Ferrer was the manager of Barcelona at the time, and he was the reserve team coach at Mallorca when I played there. And he was a good friend of mine, and he had given us passes to get us onto the pitch, special bibs that we can get onto the pitch with the cameras. And myself and Guillaume Balaguer and Rob Palmer were on the pitch, interviewing and talking to different people, which was sensational to have as a build-up to our show, which was the big game. And it was the biggest game, the biggest Classico, obviously, in the world on that Sunday. And it was a unique situation that we were in, but we were just enjoying it as people who love football. And Rob used to play as a goalkeeper at Derby County, and he loved it. Game, just loved football, full stop. And he was, he's totally sports oriented. He's written a lot of books, as you know. Pochettino, he did his book. He did Messi's book, Guillaume Balaguer, so another good friend of mine. And we all enjoyed the journey while it lasted. But it was a fantastic insight for us, and we did develop a lot of things that have been taken on now by other stations, I would say.
Yeah, well, like as I said to you there, yourself, and then you look at Guillem as well. Like everybody would know who he is now, associating him with Spanish football, and a credible source, as you say, for breaking stories. A lot of times when stuff was coming out on La Liga, or if Sky Sports would ring up Guillem and get stories from, I'm pretty sure he was involved. Well, not involved, but he had a say in the Gareth Bale deal as well, going from Spurs. Because that was delayed for long enough,
Listen, a lot of the stories at the start, initially, it was different because in Spain, there doesn't always have to be a lot of truth. I mean, if there's 10% truth in it, in Spain, they would still go for it because it's a story, and they loved that. But I remember once Guillem was talking, and he was speculating a lot. And I remember Liam Brady, who's a good friend of mine, phoning me, and Liam was saying, Gerry, would you have a word with him? Because he's out of order. He's saying he's this and he's doing that. But Guillem didn't care. He was talking from a journalistic point of view. And I used to say to Liam, listen, I know what he's like. I said, but it doesn't have to be 100% true. I said, there's a semblance of truth to it. He will start the rumor. I said, that's what they do in Spain. That's how they get their stories. You have to understand there's so many, it's just sports newspapers in the press, and that's all they do. They don't do anything other than sport. They don't do news. They just do totally sport, And then the Marca, which is the big channel, obviously for sport over there, but it covers basketball, it covers cycling, it covers all the other sports as well. And that whole newspaper is just total sport. So Game and these guys, that's how they made their living, and that's how they develop it. But it became a skill, and Game's connections are unbelievable now. The people he speaks to, the fact that he did Lionel Messi's book, it tells you, what you need to know. He did lots of the Pep Guardiola. He's done so many big names now, and Pochettino. So I have to say, all of that happened as a result of what we achieved and what we did, and we loved it. I have to say, but still disappointment that we don't get Spanish football on anymore, and it's a different setup now at Sky.
Do you think there's a way back for Spanish football, some other avenue at all?
It's a good product.
Before I kind of get you to talk about that, it's just because I'd be always trying to find it. It's so hard to find. I'd be very disappointed because you don't get to see like Messi. Okay, I'm not going to say he's coming towards the end of his career because you never know with players like him. You look at Cristiano Ronaldo, for example, but like you're missing out on kind of good years now. Do you know what I mean? There's always quality players, as you said already. The technical players coming through. It's always talented player, but you can't watch it now. It's so frustrating. Like,
yeah, well, I mean, what the frustrating thing for me was coming from the background I had and the type of football and the way I played. And Spain, the first 5, 6, 7 years of me commentating on Spanish La Liga, I was so frustrated at the free kicks and the amount of diving that went on and the play acting from players. See, for me, and I always called it cheating. They say it's simulation now, but it's still cheating for me because, and Game used to speak to me and we'd chat and he'd say, look, it's part of the culture. It's like these technical players, they want to take on the fullbacks who've got to stop them, and they want to force them to foul them so that they get a yellow card. And he said then they can't tackle them because if they tackle them again, they're going to get a red card, and then that gives an advantage obviously to their team. So I could see it from his point of view where it was a tactical thing where they had a talent and they used that talent to try and reduce the numbers to put you in a better position from your team's point of view. So we had our own personal arguments over that, and that was down to cultures, I suppose. In Spain they brought up the culture of technique and skill, and and even some of the players knew they were going to be tackled. And this is one of the things I have with the VAR at the moment. I'm watching replays, and I know the players dived, but the referee still gives a penalty because there's contact made, and it's a grey area for me. It's different. I think there should be more clarity in terms of what the referee can and can't do, and of course the official who's sitting in a studio somewhere looking at it and advising the referee. I'm not sure that's right.
I don't like
I don't
that.
agree with it. I don't agree with that. So I think VAR is at a crossroads now, and it has been before this virus started, the pandemic. I think it's at a crossroads, and it's on borrowed time because if it doesn't work out in the next 5, 6, 7 months, then I think they're going to have to go back to what they were doing. A lot of fans are so frustrated because you've got fans in the stadium who don't know what's going on, and yet the people at home are being told that the referee hasn't given the penalty, it's been a fourth official or whatever. So they're getting more information. So it's discouraging people from actually going to the game. There's loads of pluses and minuses for it all, but you've got to get the happy medium. And one of my old bosses at Sky Sports was Andy Melvin, and he used to say, if it's not broke, don't fix it. So I think we need to look at football, and it's going to have to look at itself, obviously, when we get back to training, which I think we're going to see in the next 2, 3, 4 weeks. You're going to see a lot of, certainly in Italy, I've heard that they're looking to start training again next week.
I think Germany they have as well.
Germany were looking to do it a few weeks ago. I saw Bayern Munich were pushing, but you see, they seem to have turned the corner, and they're creating situations. But the Spanish FA came up with a solution whereby the players go back into a training camp and they don't go home to their families. They stay in hotels, and it's like a lockup. And but everybody has to be tested. This is the key to it. You have to be tested for the virus. You have to make sure that you don't carry the virus. And this, if they're going to get it back, it's going to start that way, but it'll be behind closed doors. So I'm not sure you can see a crowd at a football match in the UK for this year. It could be next season before you see people going to football matches again. So football has to look at itself and see where it moves forward. I've always said about capping the wages. I think they're going crazy. I think they need to cap football. Wages have to be capped, and the transfer fees are going spiraling out of control. And I did a piece on a blog I did a couple of weeks ago about some young players who are coming across, and the transfer fees are. João Felix is one. He was 19, who signed from Benfica for Athletic Madrid, 127 million. And he had one good season at Benfica, and they paid 127 million for him. And he's an attacking midfield player. He's not even a striker. So there's a lot of gambling going on in football, and it's the same. You listen to the papers and what they report in the Championship, how many clubs have invested tens of millions to get promoted, and yet we know there's only two go up automatically and one comes up through the playoffs. So there's clubs who are going to stretch themselves, and I think it's an awful big gamble for them to take to try and get into the top flight football in the Premier League, which is worth hundreds of millions now to actually get in there. But there's so many talking points in football that we can go through, Paul. It's untrue. But I love the banter. I love what we achieved and what we did on the Spanish team. Some great guys. Terry Gibson, my own teammate from Tottenham, and he came on board about 11 years ago. Fantastic acquisition. Another one who came in, Graham Hunter in Barcelona, fantastic guy, always on the ball, really friendly with a lot of the players. His mate was Dani Alves at Barcelona. He used to speak to Dani all the time and get a lot of information from him about the team and what was going on and who was in control. And it was great to have that information. But that was how we moved in those days.
Yeah, but I can tell by speaking with you now, like how passionate, and like it brings a smile to your face. You can see a smile away there, thinking back to obviously a lot of great times.
Yeah, fantastic times. I mean, when we went to the games, the Classico games in Barcelona, you would always bump into different people, and it would surprise who would be at the games and at Madrid, and obviously in Barcelona. And then guys who were working for the Spanish TV, and we used to bump into them. And I remember bumping into Gordillo, who played in the '82 game for Spain. And I bumped into him in a commentary position about 15, 16 years ago. He was commentating, and I was chatting to him. And he said, hablas muy bien español. He said, you speak really good Spanish. And I said, I lived in Spain for 2 years, and I've been working on Spanish football for a long time, and I had a lot of knowledge. So we chatted, and it was good that, when you see people who are playing football for the national team and obviously for a club team. And Gordillo played for Real Betis. And I don't know if he was surprised because I was from another country. But then this is where Michael Robinson comes into it. Michael, he really did portray, the UK and Irish football, particularly because of where he came from and what he did. So he made a big mark as well, a huge mark. And I still, when we were at Sky, we used to have Thierry Henry would be our guest on the Clásicos. Michel Salgado was another one. Love Michel. Michel, great guy. And I always commentate. I remember a lot of things, and I remember when he played for Celta de Vigo, and he was marking, and they were playing, I think, Atletico Madrid, and the little centre midfield player, he missed the World Cup because Michel broke his ankle in that match on a chase through. Juninho. He never played in the World Cup. Yeah, Michel was chasing back after him, and he took him out on the edge of the box, and he ended up with a broken ankle, Juninho. And I always say, hey, I remember that tackle on Juninho, and he says, no, it wasn't me. But lots of fun, and I love the banter you have with a lot of the Spanish lads. Marcelo, who used to play for Newcastle, and also for my club, Real Mallorca, the centre half. He was a guest on the show lots of times. Great insight, great talking to the Spanish players. you know, and Marcelino now, he lives in Gijón in Spain, and he's a big agent, and he looks after most of the top managers in Spain. He represents them, and he represents a lot of players, and he's brought a lot of players from Spain into the Premier League. And again, that's another insight, and it's the knowledge and it's the connections that you have. So I enjoy all of that, and it still continues. It's great when you have, like, I mean, I remember Harry Redknapp phoning me, and he was manager, I think, at West Ham at the time, and he was saying about the players, and could I tell him information about different players, and he just loved, you know, picking up knowledge about different players, because you can see I saw the improvement that Ozzy Ardiles and Ricardo Villa had when they came to Spurs in 1978, the first Argentinians to come in, and they caused such a big impact. And Ozzy still, obviously, a mate of mine, still lives in London, and Ricky comes over all the time, and the difference is now, when I was talking to the men, they weren't speaking very good English, and they learned English, and now when I see Ricky and Ozzy, I can speak to them in Spanish. So those are the pluses when you get back over. But I saw the impact they had, and I now see, obviously, over the last 20 years, the impact a lot of the foreign players who played in Spain, who have what they've done and come to. You know, I talked about David Silva, Juan Mata. I talked about them when they were playing in La Liga and what quality they had. And of course, the coaches and managers and agents could see them playing, and then they make the transfers. Kun Aguero, I talked about him as a striker, many years, obviously, before he came to play for Man City. But then look at the number of Spanish managers there is in the Premier League now, and it shows you the impact they've had. And they've all managed in Spain, and they've all come over and had successful spells in Premier League. So that's all part of the knowledge and part of the fun that it's been for me watching it happen. And I used to cover the Premier League as well for ESPN out in Asia, and I did the Premier League in the afternoon on a Saturday, and then I'd have an hour break, and then I'd go straight in and do the Clásicos, the La Liga, straight after that. So I was doing Premier League for 2-3 hours with one channel on ESPN, and then I would do La Liga for Sky Sports. And it was great to see all the different leagues. And I loved when I worked at Eurosport. I used to cover all the European teams. I used to cover Portugal League and the French League, the German Bundesliga, the Turkish League. You know, I love the insight, and I love the fact that I got that opportunity. So I've been very fortunate.
Yeah, like just listening to you talking about there, it brings back so many good memories for myself as well. I just kind of hearing your stories. I hope you got a cut of some of them deals, considering you were the man behind them.
Unfortunately, no. I was very good at accommodating people and looking after everybody. But I enjoyed what I did do, and I enjoyed the parts that I played. But I mean, when David Beckham signed for Real Madrid, I commentated on his first couple of games, and then he contacted me and said he thanked me, lovely guy, thanked me for obviously the kind words I'd said about him. And I said, listen, David, I said, when you have a bad game, I said, I'll be telling everybody that you've had a bad game. I said, but when you do well, and that's what I've always done, I'll call it as I see it. And I had a good rapport with David, and it was good because I was assistant manager in Northern Ireland for 2 spells, one with Brian Hamilton for nearly 4 years, and then another with Laurie Sanchez. And the Laurie Sanchez one was great because England came to play Northern Ireland, and I was the assistant manager, coach with Terry Gibson, Dave Besson, and Laurie. And we planned the downfall, and we beat England 1-0. And obviously David Beckham was the captain, and Wayne Rooney played, and Michael Owen played, and Stephen Gerrard played, and you know they had, and Frank Lampard, they had a massive team out, and we beat them that day 1-0, which was something we planned, and it actually worked out. It was great. We pressed, we worked for 3-4 days as a team on closing down and pressing on the first touch of the ball, and not allowing them to get their head up and frustrating them and getting them into that situation, and that worked out. And then another one just before I left was we played Spain at Windsor Park, and we beat them 3-2. David Haley scored a hat-trick, and again, that was something else we planned, and that was a fantastic game. It was great to watch that, and the likes of Michel Salgado and Raul and all were playing in that game. So I had a good knowledge of all of those players, I have to say, from my my days as a commentator, and I think all of that helps. But wonderful memories.
All right, Gerry. Well, just lastly, then, you're commentating with Virgin Media. Is that what you foresee for the future? Then, just before I let you go.
No, I'm doing lots of different things. You know, I've been working with a company called Mob, and we've started a company called Mob Ireland. And Mob Ireland, they do commercials, but they do a lot of work with Manchester City, Manchester United. You know, you see the players that have signed recently for those clubs, and they also look after Liverpool, and they look after Juventus and different clubs all over the world. They do videos for them when there's Bruno Fernandes. You remember when he signed for Manchester United, and they
Yeah.
put the video comes out. That was done by Mob. They're based in Manchester, but we've now got Mob Ireland, and we also do movies. We make movies as well and series. So I'm doing a little bit of that. I did a stint years ago with the Dream Team. I don't know if you remember it in Sky One.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I was involved in that, and the producer Rod Brown's a good friend of mine, and we've worked together. And I worked with him for years in London, and he's part of the Mob Ireland team. Him and John Brocklehurst, and they're producers and obviously directors, and they're very good at what they do. So we're doing things like that, and that's something that I'm looking forward to. Obviously, when we get the opportunity when this is all over, but that's another little venture. But I'm doing lots of different things. I think I'm versatile enough that I can do lots of different things. So it's just what makes me happy at the moment.
Yeah, versatile, just like your football career.
Yeah, well, the versatility was one part of it, and the temper was another one, and I had to learn to curb that temper. It got me into a lot of trouble.
Oh, well, you seem quite calm now, but it's great to hear that you're keeping busy still. And obviously, when the pandemic is over, hopefully soon, that you're going to be back to work. I just want to say a huge thanks for coming on, taking the time out of your day, for having a chat. It's been absolutely fantastic, and something that I'll always have with me now. So thanks for that.
My pleasure, Paul. Good luck. Thank you very much.
No props. Guys, don't forget to like the video, don't forget to subscribe, and yeah, don't forget to follow Gerry. He's on Instagram there, gerry.armstrong.520. So make sure go give him a follow. The voice of La Liga, what a legend. Thanks for coming on, Gerry.
Cheers.